This is Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jim McDonald. Unfortunately, Jeff Steadman is under the weather today, couldn't join us. And it's really his loss because we've got a fantastic guest, a return guest, Martin Kuppinger. He's the principal analyst at KuppingerCole. You may just know him as Martin. So that's how I know him. Martin, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, Jim, pleasure being back here. And thanks for inviting me again.
Absolutely. And also, I guess it's welcome to 2026 for all of us. We're just getting back from the holidays and getting ourselves wrapped around or wrapped back into the identity space again and having to, solve a lot of the same problems that we were in 2025. I want to talk about a lot of things. I guess I haven't seen you since EIC in 2025. We're also looking forward to being there again. Jeff and I will be there in 2026 in Berlin. I'm sure preparations are underway from your perspective.
They are. So I'm not that much involved with the agenda work. So my works will start a little later, mostly when it comes to. So I gave a lot of input for the agenda, but then when we're getting closer to EIC, then the one thing will be scheduling. So it's always a tough thing to squeeze everyone in the tight schedule, and the other thing will be preparing my own presentations and talks.
Well, I got to say, it's just a fantastic time. Obviously, if you're in Europe, it's the number one conference covering the identity space. If you're from outside of Europe, if you can make the trip, I highly recommend it. We had a fantastic time this past year. Looking forward to doing it again this year. And by the way, we will have a discount code on our website. I don't know if we have it out there yet, but look for it within the next couple of weeks. If you're looking to register for the conference, it'll save you some money. And we're going to talk about EIC a little bit later in the agenda. But while I have Martin here, I want to pick his brain on a few topics. And Martin, Jeff and I always say it's like it wouldn't be identity at the center if we didn't talk about AI. And sometimes we joke around and call it AI at the center. But this went from, I'd say, this time last year where it was like, oh, yeah, that's something that's going to happen in the future to it's happening right now with the AI agents and companies building them and identity practitioners trying to figure out like what is our framework, what is our approach for managing AI identity.
Yeah, and as we also see that there's a lot going on with AI. There's also, I think, some disillusion starting when organizations feel they either don't have the results that were promised at the very beginning, or that they feel some things can't be done easily. So because we hear this, especially in regulated industries, that organizations are shy of deploying solutions agents, for instance, within business processes, because they feel they don't have enough control and sufficient control about these agents. And that means, yes, we have an interesting challenge here. I would dare to say in all the 35 plus years I'm in the identity space right now, this is the most, I would say, intellectually challenging evolution I've seen over all these years. So it's an incredible amount of complexity, and I think we need to be very careful of, on the one hand, finding short-term solutions to address challenges, but not believing that we have solved everything with the first, whatever, MCP server authorization solutions, because this is just a piece of the puzzle. So that will be very interesting. How can we deliver quick solutions that help, but not sort of tapping into the trap of thinking oversimplifying the challenge?
Yeah, not oversimplifying the challenge, but I also feel like um, we also have to make sure as practitioners that we are not stopping the business progress. We have to, obviously, our main charter is securing the environment, but we also have to not be the progress prevention department.
Where security is really good in. I think we've proven that for decades. That security tends to hinder business in progressing, and I think that's exactly the balance we need to find. So how can we, at the end of the day, I think with AI, sometimes as I've said, businesses are in the situation that they feel they lack a certain level of security and control and governance to proceed in what they want to do in the business. So this puts us, in some sense, much more in an enabler role than ever before, because I think from what I hear is that a lot of businesses are really, um, I would say, insecure about what they can do and what not, and they feel a risk of losing control potentially. So that means that the business is asking for a certain level of security and control. Um, Usually, it is that they don't ask much; they feel it hinders them. In this case, it feels this is what they need to be able to proceed in their initiatives, and and I think from that perspective, it might be a better situation for security or cybersecurity and identity people than in most cases before, where we were just the ones coming in saying, "Oh no, we can't do it that way, and we need to make it more complex and slower and more expensive." In this case, it's really maybe saying, "Okay, if you do that and that and that, you can at least um, sort of um, have a better, a stronger risk control." And that again goes back to what I said before. I think we need to find a good balance between solving certain of these challenges, the ones we can solve now, but we must not um, believe and also not leave the impression that this is the finite solution already. Because to solve everything, I think there are so many pieces that will take us quite a while, and it will require quite a lot of innovation. We probably will need new types of standards or improvements in protocols and all that stuff to cover all the challenges.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the way I was looking at the problem too, is that there's so many use cases. I think of myself as kind of a productive employee and I want to build my own agents. And what identity do I use or allow those agents to run under? Do I just give them access to run like me or run with my credentials? Well, that's obviously a no. There's also the use cases where you're building enterprise level applications with AI. And I think at least I think the point that you're making is like you trying to solve all these problems at one time. That's very difficult to do.
Yeah, but it's, I think the same challenge we have with many other we had in many other areas in the past. I think we need to um, sort of deconstruct this problem domain into smaller pieces, figure out solutions for the smaller pieces, and then bring them together. Um, but every element we address will help us in the overall security. We also probably will have point solutions, but we then need, for instance, sort of an end-to-end governance. So not only saying, okay, we have a bit of security here and here and here, we need an overall governance across all the pieces, which then brings things together or which helps us understanding anomalies across the entire chain. And I think a couple of things. One thing is, I think it's not a good idea to think in um, the identities of AI agents as just a non-human identity. I think so. I'm not a big believer in the term non-human identity because I think it's an umbrella term that we covers a lot of different things. So the real machine identities for IIoT or OT, the workload identities, which some call machine identities, and then we have, compared to workload identities, agents have a way higher level of autonomy, which means they are in many areas different. What I think
Yeah.
also comes into this um, or what adds to the problem domain is we are used in saying there's a human or maybe a workload accessing a system. Right now we say, okay, there's a human or a non-human that then there's an agent that works on behalf, that impersonates, that has been delegated to do whatever. There are very different ways to between just the human and the agent, and that agent then can work with other agents. So there might be a chain of agents, and then we have all the systems that these agents try to access to respond to the requests. So it's a much more networked, much complexer relationship challenge than we had before. Which also means, for instance, from an authorization perspective, we have a lot of different points of authorization. So there is the agent to the MCP server, but there's also the relationship. This is an interesting authorization field between the human and the agent. So that is where I always say, okay, there might be the situation that the agent can do more than the human will allow. So travel booking, the agent can book you any travel, but maybe the corporate policy says you're only allowed to go in hotels up to that price tag, or you're only allowed to fly economy or whatever else. But it could be also the other way around, that and we've seen these cases enough, that someone requests the agents to do things the agent is not entitled to do. So, give me the construction plan for a nuclear bomb or things like that. So I think we have way more complex relationships and authorization challenges. And we can clearly mitigate a certain part of the risk, for instance, by MCP server authorization handling it, and probably, but it's just an element of the overall solution.
Yeah, the MCP server, just thinking about that in an enterprise architecture perspective, there's an MCP server and it's managed by IT, right? But if I am a knowledge worker, to use a very old term, if I'm a knowledge worker and I'm building an AI agent to do something, and I want to connect to services that, let's just say I want to connect to Workday, right? And I have a Workday account, and I can get into Workday and I can see certain screens. And I just want to be able to take information from those screens and pull them into a spreadsheet, right? I'm trying to create a very simple example. It seems to me, and I'm painting a very specific use case here, but do I have to go back to the enterprise and say, "Hey, I need the MCP server to connect to Workday so I can do these things," or and maybe Workday's not a great example because most companies are probably connecting their MCP server to Workday, but maybe it's a legacy business application. But I teach the AI to do something to fetch me data so that I don't have to do that myself every day. I come in and it populates some spreadsheet with all the information I need. Um, I feel like I want to give it my credentials, but at the same time, then from a security standpoint, it looks like I'm the one who's doing the clicking and all that, when actually it's the agent. So we should have an agent identity to do that. This is kind of a theory of my own, which is that there should be some kind of self-service process to create a an agent ID for me to do that, rather than having to go through, you know, having one issued to me, et cetera. What are your thoughts, and what is the industry direction in terms of how to solve use cases like that, where you have knowledge workers, you want them to use AI to be more productive, but then this security layer makes it almost impossible to do it right?
That's a tricky question because, as I've said, I think that there are so many different scenarios behind that. Um, I think that the point is that knowledge worker using an existing agent? Then it's a very different thing than when we think about. I really hate this democratizing term in IT, especially in security. If it's more that everyone can create own agents, which I think raises some other questions first, like how do we keep control about these? When someone does it sort of decentralized and when not within a sort of a managed environment, and I think, but especially for these areas, I think it makes a ton of sense to have identity and access and all that stuff as a service. So I think the worst thing would be that someone tells the agent what the agent is allowed to do. I think it's better than to consume it from a service that is sort of centrally managed and sets the right sort of limits and delivers the right types of policies and identities to agents that are built decentrally. So I think the worst thing is having super user type of self-constructed agents popping up at scale and without any control.
Yeah, I see your point, and I guess I I don't fear that. In fact, come from the other perspective because I'm working on a project inside of my company right now, and it's a training project, and I want to pull data from various different places to populate and to educate the agent. So I've got a kind of a scheme in my mind, and it's like I understand it. I don't want to have to spin up a big project. I want to do like a proof of concept and etc. So, but I think this whole topic maybe ties back to what you're talking about with governance. So I kind of feel like governance is all about setting the guardrails. It's the paper and pencil side to information security, and it would behoove, I think, organizations to maybe start there, where you have a governance committee or a governance body that oversees AI, and what are the use cases that are relevant to your organization, and what are the rules of the roads in terms of what people are allowed to do and what information security protocols apply. Is that where you're getting at with governance? Was kind of like the rules of the road and the guardrails?
I think maybe to explain my perspective, I have quite some legacy in the Lotus Notes and Domino field, where hundreds, frequently thousands of databases were constructed pretty much decentrally, and still for many organizations still are a challenge in migrating these. So no one knows why, and no one knows what they are doing, which data is kept, etc. So I think, and maybe another point to bring in is, which may explain my thinking. We in many areas we have that situation that people, for instance, developers, just want to solve a problem, and security for them is not the first priority. And it's interesting to see that approaches like OPA or then, unfortunately, still relatively decentralized HashiCorp, Waltz, and others became very attractive because it removed some burden from the developers by saying, I just can consume a service. And that means you have an option to bring these things under control, to at least ensure to understand what is out there, how is it working, where are your security risks, and and for instance, manage the identities, bring things under control. And I think for when we create agents, then certain aspects should be also always be considered as a service. So it doesn't make sense that that decentrally everyone decides about whatever the access the agent should have to data. I think that is usually the one who owns the data should be the one who decides about that access. Because if you want to solve a problem, you may go out to and try to reach out to too much data, and that in some sense multiplies because it's in the nature of the of generative AI to try to gain access to as much data as it can.
That's right.
So I think in that sense it even multiplies with the sort of traditional over-entitlement challenges. And so I would say I would prefer something which goes more into a delivering identity, security, etc. as a service into that world of agent development, and ensuring that agents, for instance, in some way maybe are registered with the organization, maybe even beyond the organization, to also understand which you can trust or not.
So I think this is a really good conversation where we talk about um, identity for AI, in other words, for
Mhm.
agents. We also have the conversation of AI for identity. And what we're starting to see is a proliferation of basically almost every identity tool now has 50% more AI. But there are actually some tools that are bringing AI to the forefront for identity. I think you're seeing it with one of our sponsors that we had on the past, the Yamones. They have a chat interface to administer your IGA system, to be an end user. We had a recent sponsor on Red Block where they use AI to kind of do that last mile of provisioning. So rather than opening a ticket, you train the AI so that it can go out and automate that provisioning step. Um, what excites you when you look at this landscape of how AI is being baked into identity products? And one more comment that I'll make is that I feel like a year ago it was like, oh, AI can make these suggestions about whether to approve access or how much access the person could get. And I was never excited by that. But when those two examples they just laid out, like that shows me technology that just wasn't available in years past.
Yeah. So I think many of the early sort of AI for identity type of solutions were um, not overly innovative. So my favorite example was whatever role proposals and stuff like that. So everything around, I would say, role mining. Hey, we did it with Excel 2 decades ago. So that wasn't really the thing um, which delivered a large added value. So I think we start to see new things like all the augmentation or building connectors, which can be massively simplified by AI. Um, Different types of UXs of also when I go back a couple of years, I think I'm still, for many organizations, it's still one of these challenges that when the auditors ask for certain information, that it takes them a lot long and it takes a lot of work to compile all that information. AI can do that much faster. Put together data from different sources, deliver the results, respond to certain questions. And I think that's something where we see a benefit. I think we also see a lot of things. So I'm, for instance, not a big believer in all these bots that then pop up, and so a bit like the devil out of the box. So you're opening whatever your user interface, and then it pops up and says, "Hey, can I help you?" And you shut it down, and then you click on the next link, and it comes back and says, "Hey, can I help you?" Ideally placed very centrally so that you don't see what you really are interested in. So I think we need to we are just scratching the surface in many areas. So I would envision that AI understands when I need help. So when I'm stuck, when the way I'm using a tool is changing, because I'm obviously searching for whatever menu. I'm obviously searching for something. I am slower than I'm usually. Then AI may understand. Okay, this is Martin is stuck. He's stuck in that area, and then it might start delivering me valuable hints in the context of what I'm currently doing. Sounds a little bit weird and a bit of has too much supervision, but when I look at my car, that car would probably, I never tested it. At least it says it would do an emergency stop if I fall if I fall to sleep and don't react. So that car is constantly watching me. So we have it in our everyday life. Why should we do it in software? It's probably beyond identity, but it also relates to the sort of the UX improvements we see. Overall, I think we see some really interesting stuff here, which is helpful. As I've said, application onboarding, one of these huge challenges we are seeing. That's where AI can be super helpful. I think also AI can help us a lot in, one of the things I said to a couple of vendors when they came up with their first, we have this AI thing, and it helps you understanding which entitlements you have and where your whatever over-entitlements are, etc. And I said, AI lives from data. So why don't you look at all the usage data and use it, for instance, to tell me which 90% of the entitlements the users have are never used? That would be a real benefit, because then you can reduce the number of or can passively reduce the level of over-entitlements very quickly. That would be a huge benefit from a security and governance perspective, and maybe even understand when someone will need certain entitlements. That could be more sort of time or sort of other based on other triggers, like whatever the finance department needs certain specific entitlements during the around the end of the fiscal year, because they do certain things they only do once a year. Same holds true when you're in a factory, and for the machines, the suppliers come in and do all the software updates, etc., during the whatever 2 or 3 week summer break. Then you have a defined period where things happen, or maintenance periods in a data center, all that stuff. They are well defined. But it also could be that, again, clearly a bit scary, but maybe AI understands what will be the next thing you will do because you did it always the same way. It's a bit again, going back to my car. My car predicts what would be probably my next target for the GPS. It predicts, okay, you probably will go there next, because it knows where I'm driving. So whatever at certain times in the week, I attempt to pick up my daughter or bring her back to her flat, and then it knows, okay, most likely Martin will drive there, and when he's there, he most likely will drive back to his home. So the same we can do in IT. Also, we have probably way more indicators, because we have our Outlook or other calendar and all that information we could use, and then we could provide access just in time. We just do it sort of the millisecond ahead of when it's needed, and we remove it when the action is done. That could
Right.
be a playing field for AI in identity.
Yeah, I agree. That's where you get tremendous value. It's because I think the zero standing privileges seems unachievable without something like AI that can scale. I think for me, where AI really revolutionizes identity is when it can make decisions for people. So we've spent the last 10 years complaining about access reviews, and we give the people too much to review. And then it's like, how do we get away from rubber stamping? And a lot of it was like, okay, let's just send them the priority stuff. Let's let them delegate it out. Let's do all
Uh,
these things.
but
What
I have a
about just
simple.
letting AI decide? AI
No, we don't
should
need
have a good
AI.
idea.
We don't need AI for getting rid of access recertifications. We can do it much simpler. The easiest way is that we just say, okay, you have time limited access. So if your
Right.
interval for recertification is 6 months, only give access for up to 6 months, and you're done with all the recertification stuff. You probably will give much less entitlements. So a lot of things would be solved. But that's again a different theme. So I say, but yes, AI can help us to fix some of the problems. But we also should be like with recertification. We also should be careful of do we cure the symptoms or do we address the cause? And for roles, for recertification, etc. Curing the symptoms might be helpful, but I think the industry would be also well advised to look at what is the cause of the problem and how do we really address it at that level.
Yeah, and I use the example of recertification. The other example I was going to use was authentications. Having AI play a greater role in identifying the person on the way and in making the decision that it is the person or it's not the person. Um, I think ultimately it needs to trace back that if needed, you could see what the decision was based on. What was the basis for allowing, approving someone to have access or giving or authenticating an account or making that access review decision if it's, say, a compliance driven process and you just can't get around doing it for now. But I do think AI is going to have to provide a paper trail. But, overall, as I think about AI for identity, I think it's going to continue to be important. I think it's, like you mentioned, kind of within that framework of non human identities. There's this whole space now of software solutions focusing on non human. There's just the number of spaces, or what should I call it, like subsectors within identity it, that keeps popping up, and it's like new acronyms like IVIP, which uh, I'm not discounting the importance or how cool these different technologies are, but as a practitioner, like how am I supposed to keep track of all this? IVIP, non-human identity, KIM, ISPM, ITDR, you name it. Um, how do we as practitioners identify which of these is going to be ones that we need to pay attention to, that we need to invest in, or what are the ones that we should wait a little bit? Because we still have the disciplines like IGA, access management, privilege access management, but eventually organizations get to the point where it's like, okay, we're solid with those things. We've gotten them pretty much to the point where it's like, yes, we do enhancements. Yes, we do uh, add, change, remove as needed, but we're ready to take that next level. Um, and how uh, where do people invest?
Yeah.
What's your framework?
Yeah, so the framework we are propagating for many years is the identity fabric. I think we came up with this some 7, 8 years ago at least, and it's increasingly popular. Also, right now used by a lot of other parties, a lot of vendors, other analyst firms, etc. And I think the identity fabric is very helpful for that because with the identity fabric approach, you can think about you have sort of a capability based approach. So you don't start with the tool, you start with the capability. So which are the capabilities you need for certain use cases? And then you can look at sort of do you already have these capabilities? You can prioritize capabilities, and then you can think about which are the services where I put together certain capabilities, and then you can think about the tools that factually delivered that service. And I think we need to be very careful with this. We have a problem, we need a tool. It doesn't make that much sense. I think what we should do is think about um, what are the capabilities that will be added by sort of new technologies. That already helps us to understand, I would say, with a little bit of good human sense, whether this is something which is likely to um, exist as a separate tool category over the next years and maybe decades, or whether it's something which most likely will convert into other categories, always other evolutions. So take KEEM and what we call nowadays non-human identity management. A lot of this KEEM, in some sense, is non-human access, and the other is non-human identity. And I think there's a logic that things like that converge to an extent. You see also some convergence to PAM and other things. I think for IWIP, honestly, IWIP for me is a bit of a added capability to access governance. And I think the first question is you should ask yourself, that goes beyond the capabilities, is why do I need it? So you may say I need it, but the question why is much more interesting when we look at IWIP, because you don't have sufficient insight into your entitlements. In a perfect world of access governance and IGA, you would have that information. So it probably also means that you have challenges in your IGA program, and you need to think about, do I need IWIP temporarily to overcome certain of these things to be able to have some insights? Or is it that maybe this is sort of my next evolutionary step where I wait for my IGA vendor to add it because there are some added functions I have? Or is it that I better go back to my IGA program and think how I fix the cause to really have all the applications onboarded, etc. So what can I do here? Because IWIP at the end of the day sort of delivers something you should have with a good IGA program. A lot of what IWIP promises to deliver should be there already. And so I think the capability-based approach helps you. And then you also, if you take this broader perspective within the fabric, you also have a better understanding of these are the different bits and pieces that may be lacking, and you can prioritize it, because no organization can handle to do all these projects in parallel to add more and more tools. And I don't want identities to end up in the state of today's cybersecurity, where most organizations have far too many cybersecurity tools and still far too many gaps. So without a concept behind, we will end up in a similar scenario. And then also I think it makes a lot of sense to look at what of this is marketing or analyst hype. Clearly it's cool for an analyst to bring up a new category of tools that the analyst has invented. But is it really helpful to the end users? Probably not.
But you brought up something there about having too many cybersecurity tools. And let me just speak from my experience. So I've been in IT identity for over 20 years, over 25 years. I don't want to date myself too much, but um, all in the United States. And so I remember working on projects called vendor rationalization, right? So you take all the IT products that you're using across the enterprise and you look for, hey, we have 7 customer relationship management systems and we only need one. So let's just pick one. And even though these others might be better at something, we're just going, if this one does something, we're just going to do that. So I feel like that's a US approach, which is minimizing vendors or one throat to choke or however you want to term it. Whereas what you've been talking about is identity fabric, which I love that concept. I love the idea that you can take some kind of technology that is maybe more innovative, bring it into the environment, it becomes part of the environment, and you can connect it into the central services, potentially leveraging it.
Yeah, but
Um,
it's not
is that a
contradictory.
European thing, or is that
No, don't think so. I think don't think that it's contradictory to vendor rationalization, because when you look at the capabilities and you map it down to the tools you may already have in place. So the first thing is you may when you look for a capability and say, okay, there's something new, you may understand this fabric concept. This capability is already available in some form. It might be not the perfect implementation, but you may have it. And then you already have something where you say, okay, then I can use that capability. The other thing is if you feel and start analyzing and you see that that same capability is delivered by multiple solutions, then you can use exactly this approach to start your rationalization and think about, does it make sense to reduce it? I think this is always a balance. So sometimes the cost of rationalization is higher than the benefit of rationalization. Again, something to think about carefully, but it also helps you to understand where is the potential for rationalization when you look at your existing infrastructure. What do you already have? Which capabilities do you have? Can I not use these same capabilities for the other use case? Be it from the same instance or a different instance of the same tool. But the fabric, I think, fits very well to that because it gives you the flexibility. The point is, I think that the main thing is really this understanding of I take a broader perspective, and this is nothing which takes you months or years. You can do that very, very fast. And then you can understand what is where's my redundancy, or where are my redundancies? Where are my gaps? Are these gaps of relevance or not? You don't need everything in identity management. And the other element is what we commonly use is our reference architecture, which lists the different building blocks. And bringing these things together helps you to understand, okay, this is these are all the elements, and you may then end up with saying, okay, I have all the elements in there. So if you have a consumer identity management and an employee or workforce identity management, you basically have all elements for partner identity management already available. So you can ask yourself the question, does it make sense to add another solution? Is it maybe even that my access management piece can serve both customers and employees? But the B2B part always would be sometimes closer to the consumer, sometimes closer to the workforce, but you would have everything as a capability already there. And then you can think about, does it make sense? Is there a benefit in adding another tool? If you have certain elements of visibility, is there a benefit of adding another tool? Or is it maybe even that you say I can't rationalize because I have already too many overlaps? And the point, the identity fabric, really, the starting point was, especially exactly in these days where beyond workforce identity, we saw consumer identity emerging, and then we saw the B2B stuff. And my thinking was, hey, it doesn't make sense to have a ton of identity silos over time. And this is exactly this rationalization thing, which was therefore, I would say, from the very beginning in the thinking of the identity fabric.
right. I think with the fabric too, you can have the coexistence of multiple generations of technology and not feel like, hey, every time we want to add some new capabilities, like ripping off the band-aid and starting with a full migration project. That was always one of the benefits that I saw in the fabric. I just wanted to ask you, like on those spaces that we talked about, are there any that you feel like people need to be paying really close attention to, like IVIP, which is identity visibility intelligence platforms? So we had a sponsor on recently, Nexus, who's in that space. Uh, ITDR, ISPM. We've had Silverford on the past. Those feel like compelling solutions. Are there any that kind of jump off? And I'm not talking about like vendors, but are any of these spaces ones that you feel like organizations ought to be taking a close look at now?
Yeah, I think the most important area clearly is everything around these workload identities and AI identity, or A identity as I tend to call it. So this intersection of AI and identity. I think this is the most relevant field of all of these. And that automatically brings in a certain level of ITDR, for instance, so you can handle that this huge amount of sort of newer, they are not really new identity types, without a certain degree of automation and detection response. So you need these capabilities there. But I think from the risk and complexity perspective, I probably would put my focus on these. And I would say, when you look at the Ivy vendors, most of them are, in a sense, or many of them have their roots in the access governance space. So it's an innovation, I would say, plus a new buzzword, mainly in an existing space where it's about continuous improvement. And yes, there might be a need for these capabilities. The same, I think, holds true for ITDR, also with the relationship clearly to XDR. The biggest really new challenge, untackled challenge in that sense, clearly from my perspective, is workload identities and agentic AI identities. And if you have anything in hardware that has identities like industrial IoT and traditional OT, this is also a huge field where things can go horribly wrong. So you should put your focus on that.
Yeah, for sure. So all these topics that we talked about today are ones that are going to get a lot of attention at EIC, which is coming up in May in Berlin, Germany. I'll be there. Jeff will be there. Um, Martin, tell us a little bit about what to expect. Is there going to be anything different in this year's EIC than in years past?
So I think EIC, the concept will remain the same. So we have a lot of tracks, keynotes on the first afternoon, workshops on the first morning, morning keynotes, evening keynotes, a lot of interaction. I think a lot of conversations as usual on the floor where people meet and discuss and exchange. And we also will have, from what I know, again, our food trucks outside and so for the breaks, all that stuff. Topic-wise, I think we touched several of these topics. A identity will be very important. Workload identities will be very important. I think also other evolutions will be important. The identity fabric will play an important role. We will again look at the decentralized identity stuff where a lot of things are going on. So the EUDI wallet is sort of coming closer. We have the Apple wallet and the Apple ID stuff and other initiatives. And it's clearly about and also understanding how does this play into the broader identity field. We will look at some of the other more consumer identity related topics like consent. So we are preparing I believe a very, very interesting keynote session around that with some really, really smart people discussing about what could be the future of consent, because no one likes the cookie consent stuff. So it's really annoying. So we need to figure out better ways to do that. And so I think that will also be a theme. We probably also will look, because in this EIC term, there's also this cloud element. I think the sovereign cloud discussion clearly is something which is important, especially for a European conference. But when you look at just, I think, today's announcement of AWS for sovereign clouds, where they will spend billions again, it means it's relevant for everyone. And so we will see, I think, have a very broad set of themes again. We will discuss, we will be again fully hybrid. So sessions will be available on site, but also you can join virtually, which I think a lot of people really, really appreciate. Also sometimes because they have to to do a call sometimes in the morning in the hotel and then watch some sessions remotely while they then move to the venue later on. All that stuff will be the same. Food hopefully also will be as good as at all the other conferences we were running. Yeah, hopefully the
Yeah.
weather is good.
I mean, so my experience from attending last year was the keynotes were fantastic. I mean, your keynote, I'm not just saying that because you're here, but your keynote was really good on the identity fabric. It really got me, I think, again, as like, I think I have kind of a American centric view sometimes, right? And maybe with the way we talked about it today, I'm softening on that, and I feel like maybe it's not so much an American centric view in terms of product or picking a picking a solution versus being comfortable with multiple solutions in the enterprise. So the vendor rationalization piece, regardless. The I felt like that really got the wheels turning. A lot of the sessions as well. You had a lot of people from the ID Pro community come from the United States as well as from within Europe attending. There was an identifier
Very
in
important.
Berlin that kicked it off. I'm going to be in Italy the following week, and we're going to set up an identifier. Andrea Rossi and Marco are going to, work with me, or I'm going to probably do very minimal versus them, and getting that identifier set up in Rome. It'll be the first one. Um, so look for that on LinkedIn. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, please let's connect. And I'm sure Martin's the same way.
Yeah.
But also the after hours events and things like that. It was just one of the one of my favorite conferences of all time.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And I also want to
looking
give a
forward.
shout out to Marina from your team. She was working on the back end, making sure that we could podcast and we had a good setup and we had discount code, which is very important to our listeners. So definitely shout out to Marina, doing a great job, and look forward to working on this year's event with her.
Okay. Yeah, looking forward to meet you again in Berlin then in May.
Absolutely, and really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for doing this, Martin. Any final words for our audience before we depart?
I think the most important thing I believe is we should, as an industry, and I think in many organizations, sometimes just take a little time, step back and think about, are we um, curing symptoms or are we fixing the cause? And I think that would be really helpful. So is this something we just do as an interim solution, or is this really uh, the sort of the longer term solution? And also always think about, do we need this added capabilities? What is the first thing we need? Where do we spend our time and resources? Um, and yeah, being a bit conscious about so not blindly follow every new buzzword. I think that helps a lot.
Great advice. Thank you, Martin. I'm going to wrap up the show, everyone. So you can find us on the web at idacpodcast.com. There's the listen function. If you go into the listen function, you can search all of our past episodes. So if there's a topic that you're interested in or a particular person within the industry that may or may not have been on the show, you search for their name. If you search for Martin, you're going to find a lot of episodes. He's been on the show quite a number of times. We certainly appreciate that. We're also on YouTube. So you can go to idacpodcast.tv, takes you right to our YouTube page. And of course, we're on every um, podcasting platform. So if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I think we're getting to the point where you type in identity, we're going to be the first or the second option. Obviously, if you search for identity at the center, you're going to find us. If you have a moment and you feel like we've earned it, please give us a 5-star rating and leave a review for the show if you've got the time. We always appreciate those. And Jeff and I and Martin, we're all on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. Any comments you have about anything that was discussed today, please, good, bad, or indifferent, send them our way. Again, thank you, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.